Hello and welcome back, FSMA Friday friends, to the best event that's going to help you slide right into the weekend. My name is Jim Albright, and I am happy to be back with you all today as we look at some ways that you can remove the risk of violating FDA requirements during an inspection and avoid receiving those pesky Form 483s. But before we begin, for those of you who are new to FSMA Friday, thanks for joining. We're happy that you're here. Just to let you know, this is a monthly series that began back in 2012 through the partnership with Safety Chain and the Acheson Group to provide regular updates, insights, and guidance around the changes within the Food Safety Modernization Act. Now, this is your chance to interact with industry experts from TAG and learn about some methodologies and tools that can help you better navigate through FSMA requirements and also keep your customers happy and healthy. So just a couple of housekeeping items here. We've muted all attendee mics, but we are leaving room at the end of today's session for some Q&A, so please do put in your comments and questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll absolutely do our best to get through them all. But if we happen to run out of time today and we didn't get your question, don't worry, we will follow up with you after the webinar. And of course, this presentation is being recorded, and you will all get the link to the replay and the slides later on today. Okay, I am excited to welcome back to FSMA Friday, Lacey Keesee, who is previously joined FSMA Friday to talk about how to ramp up food safety culture, communication, and your coordination efforts to ace your internal audit processes. So Lacey, it's great to have you back with us, and I'm really looking forward to today's discussion.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate the welcome, and welcome to everyone who is joining us on today's webinar. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, I have been in the food industry now 17 years, and I have worked in several different sector categories of food production. I have always been in manufacturing environments, in quality and food safety roles, and I have had lots of experience going under the FDA investigations as well as external audits, and have lots of experience doing site assessments now with TAG as a food safety director. I am a consultant who works with our clients to assist in troubleshooting with crisis management. I love doing root cause analysis and corrective action program design. I also have got some experience with sanitation program design, the implementation and review of food safety plans and program assessments overall, and also hygienic design. So it is a pleasure to be with you all today.
That's a lot of experience. We're so happy you're here, Lacey.
Thank you.
All right. You got some FSMA updates for us?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to run through a few regulatory updates quickly since our last FSMA Friday in February. We have had a few things that come out that definitely warrant some attention. So there was an FDA call to action letter for our infant formula manufacturers that was released on March the 8th. And basically the FDA commissioner and the director of the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition wrote this letter to address some concerns about infant formula. And it is targeted towards not only manufacturers, but also packers, distributors, exporters, importers, and retailers of infant formula. So the letter is basically in response to a series of Chronobacter illnesses, lots of news about that recently, and pretty much the FDA is not content with how companies have been monitoring the presence of bacteria and indicators of Chronobacter in their facilities. And this letter, really to note one important thing from it, does talk about the suggestion, and when the FDA does these call to action letters, it's a highly recommended suggestion that Chronobacter positives in the environment or in the product be included in a notification to the FDA when that occurs. So there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of churn about it out there right now. And if you haven't read it yet, it's definitely available on the website, the Acheson Group website as well. We just put it out at the beginning of the month. So if you need any references to that, you can feel free to go to our website, and also we have it posted on LinkedIn. The next thing we wanted to talk about is the prevention strategy to enhance the safety of soft, fresh queso type cheeses. And this is in response to, between the years of 2014 to 2017, the FDA investigated 5 Listeria outbreaks that were linked to these type of products. Normally, it's most of the time having to do with unpasteurized milk, but recently investigations have also linked pasteurized milk to the process of cheese making. So all of the manufacturers out there, they have put out a fact sheet which can help you understand those risks that can occur during your production. And that is on the FDA website as well as the Acheson Group website. The next bullet point there has to do with the use of salt substitutes. So, we all want to be more healthy, and reducing that sodium content is very important. So the FDA is going to propose and amend the standards of identity for the use of salt substitutes for foods. So the proposed rule would help support a healthier food supply and also provide flexibility for industry innovation for the production of foods and able to, help you reduce that sodium content. So some very interesting things coming up there. We also have had a guidance document come out on the dietary food labeling statements, and the FDA has issued this draft guidance to provide food manufacturers with recommendations on how and when to use dietary guidance statements on your labels. And if you are trying to promote good nutrition or make a health claim, definitely want to read through this guidance. And right now it is open for comment. If you do have any comments on that guidance, you have up until June the 26th of 2023 to get those comments in so they can review them. And then the last bullet point there is talking about the second pre-market consultation for human food that is made using animal cell culture technology. And basically what this is not part of the approval process. That hasn't happened yet. It's still pre-market consultation. But once all of that is complete, the FDA will issue a guidance to assist firms that will intend to produce these type of foods made from animal cells. So some very interesting things going on in innovation these days. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right into our presentation where we are focusing on and talking about corrective action and preventive action programs. We wanted to talk about this topic today because we have seen from a tag standpoint with our clients a trend in FDA investigations. When they come onto sites, they are looking for a robust CAPA program, and they have actually been known to initiate Form 483 in response to food safety investigations that they don't feel are robust. If they see a failure in a CAPA program, or they don't feel like it is a fully integrated program that is doing a good investigation, that is how sometimes you can end up with a Form 483 at the end of your inspection. And in dealing with certain clients that may be getting these, or customers, you want to understand the why behind it and what the FDA is really looking for. So I'm going to go over the basics of a good corrective action and preventive action program. And also I'm going to talk about the things that the FDA is focusing on and what some of these 483s are ending up being written for. So just understanding through the presentation, we're going to talk about not necessarily how to ensure that your getting out of a 483 because we want you to do the right thing. It's all about making safe food for your customer, but how to understand what the FDA is looking for to ensure that they feel confident in your CAPA program. So very simple definition, when you have any nonconformity or an incident within your site that is identified, and it can be within a realm of any of these departments, right? You could have it in operations, sanitation, warehouse, maintenance, transportation, and of course QA. Then you're going to end up with something that is going to need a CAPA. Definitely want to be issuing CAPAs for product recalls. That's a very big thing that the FDA is going to be interested in. They also are going to want to understand for withdrawals, and they are definitely looking for good CAPA investigations for customer complaints, especially when it has to do with injury, illness, or death. So we all know about the Sakota hazards. We all understand that's what our consumer complaints programs should be focusing on. So you want to understand and make sure that you have the proper triggers to make sure that you're initiating these investigations. You can also use them anytime that you have got an internal or an external audit finding. So real basic, what is a food safety investigation? And we're going to focus on food safety today because that's what the FDA is going to want to see. You also can use your CAPA program to assess other issues or incidents that are occurring within your facility, whether it's with the quality of your foods, your operational efficiency, your maintenance, your transportation. It can be used across the gambit for your site. However, we're going to look at food safety related investigations because that is what the FDA does focus on. When you have a food safety investigation, it must be a multifaceted activity. Definitely need to understand if you have a hazard that exists and what is that assessment for the nature and the extent of the issue. So if you are having multiple product holds, and this is a 483 that we've seen before, due to, for example, finished product microbiological specifications being out of range, and you're constantly putting product on hold. Well, the FDA is going to see that, and they're going to ask you, where is your CAPA investigation for this? Where is your food safety investigation for this? We need to understand that you are doing the proper documentation, the proper investigation, and the proper assessment for each of these to ensure that you do not have an out of control situation here. It's important to know that what is the story that your findings are telling you, and are they giving you a basis for the appropriate actions that are taken to eliminate or minimize potential risk. So that's what you want to understand and be able to tell the story to the FDA when they come in, when the investigators want to see it. Are you able to maintain that you do have control of your food safety programs? So what are some of the drivers? Now, the FDA is not going to tell you directly what you have to do food safety investigations or CAPAs for, okay? So it is up to your internal, it's up to your company to decide what is going to trigger a food safety investigation or CAPA, and I highly recommend that you have this written into policy. Some CAPA programs, if they are well developed and if you have the proper resources and the proper amount of understanding for the people who are involved in these investigations, if they are a very mature program, you can actually require that you're doing CAPAs for every incident that occurs. However, if you are more new to CAPA, or if you have a infancy stage development of a CAPA program, then you might want to kind of focus in your details and ensure that you are able to wrap your hands around a CAPA program to make sure that it is a good program before you just start to initiate them for every little deviation. So I definitely recommend in your policy defining the who, what, when, and where of when you're going to do a full-blown CAPA investigation, for when you're just going to do a root cause analysis, or for when you're just going to initiate a deviation to watch it for a trend. Some examples for these drivers can be your internal company findings. So obviously, food safety deviations from your preventive control plan. Definitely want to do that. You can also include quality assurance, attributes from sensory, from taste, flavor, etc. Also, should be looking at micro results. Now that can be defined within your policy of, a certain trend or a certain amount within your specifications, and that's completely up to you. As long as you are able to justify the risk, then you're going to be okay with it being written into your policy that way. You just need to be able to explain the why behind those decision of what those drivers are. Also, definitely, product holds, especially when they have to do with food safety. Environmental monitoring positives. Now, we have seen 483s that have been issued due to improper CAPA on environmental monitoring positives. So we all know that with the requirement of listeria testing or salmonella testing based off of your site and what you're running, those environmental monitoring positives do happen. And the FDA does want to see them, but they also want to ensure that you are doing proper investigation to make sure that you have control of your environment, to ensure that it is not contaminating your finished product. So being able to show those results and also show that you are monitoring those results for trends and making sure that they are not causing bigger problems within your facility is very important. The documentation of these investigations is the biggest thing that I will highly recommend. Make sure that you have got start to finish the investigation details, everything that was going on in that environment at that time. Did you have contractors in? Did you have visitors? Were there a rash of new employees hired? All of those things, and we can kind of talk about conducting the root cause analysis later, are very important and what they're going to be looking for in a thorough investigation. So I cannot say enough, document, document, document. Make sure that you have a robust and thorough investigation. There's obviously other examples on this slide that tell you what drivers could be. And like I said, it's definitely up to your company to decide what those are. For sure, the FDA is going to look for them for customer and consumer complaints. You can also do them with, public health authority audits, regulatory audits, internal audits, different things like that. And also you can do them for supplier issues. Okay, so what are the initial steps when you are conducting a CAPA or a food safety investigation? So I went ahead and threw the regulation in there. So if anyone was wondering and they want to read through what it says, it's in 21 CFR 117.150. And basically the statement is food companies must have a current and tested food safety investigation policy and program, which is the foundation for all actions. So there you have it. That is where it is in the regulation, and that is what they will cite if they come in and see that you do not have a proper CAPA program, or if they feel you do not have a robust investigation program when it comes to certain food safety deviations. So what do? You've got your policy written, you've identified your drivers. How do you start this process? You need to understand what your assessment risk is for this incident, whatever it may be, and gather a core team to do an initial assessment. You want to make sure you're following your policy, and you can define it in your policy on how to do these steps. And you can start off by saying, okay, is an investigation required? So according to our policy, are we going to do a full-blown CAPA investigation? If not, do we have the risk justified for the why not? Make sure you have that documented. It's very important. Also, there are different levels of this type of investigation. You can put in your policy whether you're going to do a simple deviation investigation, or if you're going to go all the way through a full-blown root cause analysis and corrective and preventive action, which I continue to call a full-blown CAPA. So Once you've decided that you're going to go into a full-blown CAPA, you want to ensure that you are gathering your initial info. I highly recommend putting into your policy a certain time frame, a window to be able to capture all of these details. Because when an incident happens in the facility, you've only got a certain amount of time before people's memories are going to start to fade for what happened. And you want to get in there and document, interview people, understand what was going on at the time of the incident, and get all those details written down. This is part of your investigation process. The earlier you do it, the better you're going to be off, because people's memories obviously fade. We are in fast-paced industry right now. Things happen every day. Problems occur every day. You have different shifts of people coming in. You have weekend shifts and 12 hours, and you might not be able to catch up with a person for 4 days who was actually present during the time of the incident, because due to their shift hours or the schedule that they're working. So put into your policy, I suggest 48 hours. That's just a personal recommendation. Obviously, it's up to your company, but to be able to gather this initial info of what exactly happened when the incident occurred. Write all of that down. Understand, is this type of investigation something due to a consumer complaint? Did we get illness or injury, or is there a potential for illness or injury? The FDA wants to see that you have done some type of health hazard assessment or risk assessment to make sure that you're thinking about the end user in this process. Even if the product is on hold and still under your control, they want to see you document what could happen if this were released into commerce. So make sure you're doing that risk assessment in the initial phase. Make sure you're documenting all of that information from these folks' brains when it happened as well. Also, you want to document how much product, if it has been released or if it is in distribution or in the marketplace, has been affected. Document how you determined your hold bracket if it's something that has been released into commerce. And also document your traceability process. How are you sure that the product says, that your system says your product is where it says it is? Do you have good traceability? So once you initiate that investigation, form a team. Make sure that you've got a cross-functional team, and you want to have different disciplines with different backgrounds and expertise there. You don't want to fully put this type of plan into the QA department's hands. You want to bring in operations, maintenance, engineering, sanitation, receiving, depending on what the process or depending on what the incident is. So make sure that you've got a good cross-functional team, and do not only include QA, because you can definitely overwhelm them with that, and also you're not getting the cross-functionality and that understanding and knowledge of what's going on in the facility, or the ideas on how to solve it as well, without a cross-functional team. Definitely want to appoint a team leader. I highly suggest someone who is good at doing root cause analysis and CAPA, and who is good at leading a team and assessing actions and making sure that actions are being done and tasked, and keeping the team on task. Because it's very easy, especially in the beginning, when you get into these sessions, to do a brainstorming of, we got to solve it now. And you've got 10 people in a room, and everyone is throwing out different ideas of what they think the root cause is. So it's very important to have a strong team leader to keep everyone in check and on point for the process, to let it work appropriately. Then for your subsequent steps, you're going to make sure that you gather up all that info that you documented down, gather up your risk assessment, and then you're going to start conducting your RCA, or your root cause analysis. I am sure everyone on the call has seen these tools before. I am going to go over them just because they're so helpful, and talk about the different ways. The FDA is not going to tell you how to do your root cause analysis. They just want to see that you did a proper investigation and how you arrived to your root cause. Once you do arrive to your root cause, you're going to establish your corrective and your corrective actions and your preventive actions. And also you're going to want to make sure you have a clause in your policy about approving the closure of the investigation and conducting effectivity checks. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. Okay, so what are some of the key elements? When you're doing a food safety investigation, you want to make sure, like I said earlier, you have an organized team. You want to understand who is on the team, if they have got the expertise and the understanding. Are they good at data gathering and documenting the process, making sure someone is taking notes during the meetings where you're talking about the RCA, and making sure that everyone stays on task. So having that good team leader who is keeping everyone on point. Understanding what systems that you're using. Are you doing your traceability early in the beginning to make sure that all of the product that is bracketed within your incident is appropriately accounted for? Understanding that your data and analytics can sometimes help you get to root cause. So what is the history? Has this ever happened before? Asking the questions about the investigation or the incident that occurred, to look back into your history to make sure that you don't have any indicators of what has happened before that could help you in your investigation. So definitely looking into the history of, not only has this ever happened before, but your process control history. Have we ever had an indicator that this happened before and maybe it didn't go as far as to cause illness or a customer complaint, for example? Also understanding the support. So this is a big one. And in my experience, when working through CAPAs, you always have got the multifunctional team, and it's very difficult because everyone is so busy. So understanding from a management standpoint and knowing that this team needs to be prioritizing the task that they are doing. Understanding the timeliness that they have to work on this task, because the FDA does not want to see you open an investigation within 2 days of an incident occurring and then you don't close it out for 3 months later. That's going to be a problem. They are going to be looking for timely, good investigations. You can also write that into your policy and trigger a certain time point based off of the risk of the scenario. They want to see you taking the investigation seriously and documenting the root cause within a good time frame, as well as the corrective actions. So you want to be able to give your people who are on the team the support and the resources they need to be able to do a good corrective action, and also to be able to implement that. Sometimes it might take investment as well, and understanding that and what to do in the short term until that long-term investment can be made. And communication. That is a very big element of doing a good food safety investigation, because you want to make sure that everyone in the upper echelons of management, as well as down to the employee level, know that this event happened. I've also seen best in practice industry where a big company who has multiple sites share CAPA investigation findings and root cause findings with each other. So it might not have happened at your site, but you're hearing about it and you can go look at your site to ensure that it doesn't happen. So you can learn from others, this incident occurred and we don't want it to happen at our site. So that is such a great tool of communication between companies or sites. And ensuring that you have the support. And also you can put sign-offs from managers into a CAPA. Like if you're using a software, Safety Chain actually has CAPA management program software where you can assign a workflow for an upper management personnel who might not have been investigating it or into the incident investigation team, but they want to read through that investigation. So you can actually assign them a task to review and approve the investigation. This allows for good communication between the teams. Okay, so simple definition here. What is a root cause analysis? And it's basically a systematic method where you're problem solving and you're going to be using the tools to determine the underlying reasons for how and why an event, like a product contamination or a consumer illness, has occurred. And we want to understand that getting to the root cause is the most important thing, because you do not want to have repeat issues. So you want to make sure you're eliminating it from happening again. So during root cause analysis, we talked about all of these things, and I'm going to go through a couple of the root cause analysis tools here in just a minute. You want to also make sure that you are addressing contributing factors. We're going to talk about the differences there. And also keep in mind that you might have multiple root causes going on with one issue. So just to understand a little bit of a difference between a root cause and a contributing factor. A root cause is an underlying reason that resulted in a system breakdown. If the root cause had not occurred, this event would not have happened, or it would have been significantly lower in impact. Okay, so that's the why it went wrong. Your contributing factor can be a physical, biological, or other factor that directly or indirectly results in an outbreak or another incident. So that could be something that allowed the root cause to happen, right? So the why it went wrong is the root cause. The what went wrong is your contributing factor. So maybe you failed your food safety controls. So we have a couple of examples here, and I won't take too long on these. So for a processed food that got recontaminated after pasteurization and actually entered into the market. So the root cause identified was the fact that there was no SOP, and maintenance was doing some ad hoc fixes because we had economic stress. There was no food safety personnel on site to say, hey, that's probably not a great idea. And the HACCP plan didn't even include post-pasteurization recontamination. So those are all examples of your root cause. Now, a contributing factor in this scenario would be, well, that ad hoc fix, the valve that should have made sure that nothing that was unpasteurized made it through, got bypassed. And then the product was not being monitored for post-processing recontamination because in retrospect, well, it shouldn't have ever got there in the first place. So that's a good difference between contributing factors and root causes. And during these investigations, it's okay to line up contributing factors because you should take action on those, right? You want to make sure those don't happen again as well. Another example here of a salmonella contaminated tree nut, which caused an outbreak. The root cause is the fact that there was no scientific knowledge among food safety experts within the company that knew that this could happen. So the company culture did not really understand the product risk, and it was not addressed in the HACCP plan or the food safety plan. A contributing factor for this is the fact that a weather event, a ton of rain, increased the contamination at harvest in the fields. So another one could be the fact that pathogen reduction interventions were insufficient to control salmonella levels. So they were heating the tree nuts or sufficiently killing them, so they thought, but because the salmonella levels were so high, it wasn't validated to properly bring it down to a proper kill level. So just another example there to try and understand the difference between why it went wrong and what went wrong. Okay, so I am sure you all have seen a fishbone before. I just wanted to throw this up here as one of our root cause analysis tools. It is a very good tool to use when your group is doing that brainstorming session. And a lot of companies, I've actually also seen it called a 6M. So where you throw up the 6 M's of man, method, machine, mother nature, material, measurement, and you kind of brainstorm all the things that could have gone wrong or did go wrong in the incident under these 5 or 6 different categories. And it can help you delineate between your contributing factors and truly get to your root cause. So here is just an example up on the screen. There's also another RCA tool called the 5 Why, and this is one of my favorite tools because it is very simple, it is very quick, and you can get to your root cause by asking the questions around your problem statement. So you first off figure out what your problem statement is, and then you ask, why did that happen? And you continue to ask why until you get down to the point of, okay, I can't ask why anymore. And most of the time, that last thing that you answer is your root cause. Now, sometimes you're going to get to a root cause that is something like an act of God, where you cannot control it. We had a major weather event, so you're going to have to take a step back and look at the contributing factors that should have stopped you from happening in the first place. So it should have killed all the salmonella in our tree knot example. And then our last slide here is FMEA, which if you all are familiar with this, it is one of those events that you need to adapt a lot of time to, and it's for when you have a major food safety failure within your facility or your site. And this is when you are having some issues that continue and continue and continue. You can use a FMEA to try and help you figure out exactly what is going on because you're just not able to get to the root cause. So it stands for the failure mode and effects analysis. And as you can see in the different categories of rows there, you basically look at every process step or input into what happened within your incident. And then you lay out the potential failures, you lay out the potential causes, and then you look at the current controls. And in that way, you're looking at everything in the process. And these events, I've seen them last from 8 hours to 2 or 3 days, up to a week even, because they are for food safety major events like a recall or for a trending event that just continues to happen that you're not able to get to that root cause. Okay, so once you get through your tools and you've done your brainstorming, you've brought your team in and they've gotten to what they all agree is a root cause. How do you know whether you're successful or not? And this is very important because when the FDA comes in and they read through these investigations, they want to see that the root cause was identified, that the corrective actions were put in place, and that they solved the issue, right? So you want to be able to prove that you got to the correct root cause. And sometimes you're going to find out that you might not have actually gotten to the root cause like you thought you did. So how do you tell when a root cause is identified? It's important to understand and evaluate every root cause. So like we talked about with using the 5Y or the fishbone diagram. Making sure that you have used a logical approach. So that fault tree analysis or your 6M or your 5Y, it really just helps to ensure that all of the potential root causes have been identified. And during an investigation, if you do have more than one root cause, it is okay to branch out and have 2 different action plans to address both. You also want to do that for your contributing factors, right? So you want to make sure that you identified within your investigation if there were any people issues causing your problem. So behavior training supervision is a very easy answer to a root cause, and I caution you away from using training as a root cause because that usually is just a contributing factor. So if folks aren't trained appropriately, yes, they could definitely cause problems, but sometimes it is something underlying that is also causing that issue, and you want to make sure that you address that rather than just the training. I usually recommend that training be a preventive action or a corrective action, not necessarily the root cause of the issue. Also, make sure that you're looking at your past history. So if you have an event that has occurred several times and it's becoming a trend, you want to look at the other investigations. I've seen a really good best industry example of where they call a parent and a child investigation. So something happened and then something else happened that kind of was related to it. Well, they are connecting those two to understand. If you read through this investigation, you also want to go back through and read through the parent investigation because we feel that they're related. So looking for those trends, has this root cause been identified previously? Because if it was, then either the corrective actions were not proper to take care of it, or they basically was not the correct root cause. It was just a contributing factor. So you have to use your tools, make sure you understand your history, and make sure you have someone that is able to look at the big picture, because that's what the FDA is going to want to see. They need you to prove to them that just because you have micro issues on one line and on another line at the same time, it does not necessarily mean that they're related. And you want to be able to prove that to yourself as well, because for your company, for your customers' sake, to keep your food safe, you want to make sure that you are understanding as a whole, we do not have a food safety problem, or we are not out of control with our environmental monitoring program, or we do not have unsanitary conditions. I have seen the FDA draw that conclusion because they have different sets of data points across a facility, and they bring it into a whole blanket statement to say, well, I'm sorry, but you're processing under unsanitary conditions and you can't prove to me otherwise. So you want to be able to document these investigations to prove if these situations are truly not related. That is exactly where you want them to go and to understand when they read through your investigation. So make sure that you are justifying every action and everything that you put on that paper. Okay, so we've talked about when and how and why. Now, what do we do when we feel like we got to root cause? How do we conclude an investigation? You want to make sure you put that into your policy. Someone needs to be approving it. Someone needs to be saying, yes, this has been taken care of, and I approve of this closure. You have to define that responsibility. Make sure that you are understanding your success criteria. What does it mean to say, yes, we closed it out? Also understanding your opportunity costs, because they can be large sometimes. Looking into other issues like I was talking about earlier with the parent-child investigation, and avoiding that failure of wanting to give up. So sometimes you're going to get to the end of an investigation and all the data might not be there pointing you to your root cause. I have seen instances where a root cause unknown was the root cause, but you have to make sure that you leave an effectiveness check in there to go back and look at trends to see if any new data has come out within a couple of months of the issue. You want to put that into your policy, and I would not use it on a regular basis. So if your root cause is not identified, that's okay. And you can have different reasons for that, but you want to make sure that you define it and also define your risk level for the FDA. Well, we didn't get to the root cause, but here's how we're mitigating the risk until we can figure out what it is. Put all of that in your investigation. So overall, a comprehensive corrective action plan will not only address the specific root causes, but your corrective actions that you did from the lessons learned. So make sure that you are learning lessons, like I said, sharing identities and data from other site issues that happen from other incidents. Make sure that when you do identify your corrective action, that the corrective actions are implemented. The worst thing you can do is say that you're going to correct an action with a investigation by a due date, and the FDA comes in and you haven't done it yet. Also, they're going to want to see that timely closure of actions. So make sure that you're appointing proper due dates, and if you miss those due dates, you need to justify why. Also have some type of verification and validation built into your CAPA program. So that way, when you go back and look at it, you can see, did we have any trends? Did we have root cause analysis that was closed out, but then it happened again? And did we open up a proper investigation to go back and see why we had that repeat failure? So make sure that you are looking into the history of your program to assess whether or not it is effective. So just as a takeaway, keeping in mind that root cause analysis and food safety investigations, or CAPA, are a retrospective investigation method, and you want to make sure that you are getting to that root cause, getting to that underlying of why did this happen. And it can have a great impact on your food safety culture. If you are involving your associates and getting them on these teams, you can really move your food safety culture in a positive direction, because folks feel like they're being heard when they see problems on the floor. It gives them a tool to be able to report the issues that they are seeing on the floor. And your food safety culture is going to be maintained when you adopt these root cause analysis approaches, because they see, management really wants to do the right thing, and they want to make our jobs work better because we won't be having all of these problems. A root cause culture emphasizes the inquiry of the people who work there and the insights of the folks who are on the floor. They feel valued rather than having enforcement or punishment when things go wrong. So it really encourages collaboration across your stakeholders in your company, all the way from the management team down to the employees on the floor. So these repeat issues do not occur, and it makes everything so much better from a positive standpoint, and you don't end up in that food safety investigation with the FDA. So you do not end up having those violations or those 483 forms. It's important to ensure that your individuals within your organization have got sufficient support and that they feel heard. So it's a great thing for your food safety culture.
Wow.
Okay, I think we're here for questions.
And we sure got a lot of questions. This was great, Lacey. I
That's
loved it.
great.
I absolutely loved it. Yeah, lots of folks chiming in saying this is a great presentation. Looking forward to reviewing with their teams
Thank
once
you.
once we pass the replay and the slides out later today.
Okay,
So thank you so much. Great presentation.
good.
Um,
Thank
I'm going to start off with a question from Brian. He just wants some clarification because you had mentioned CFR 117.150. I'm just going to read what he says. The narrative within the code does not actually state that companies must have an investigation policy or program. So
No.
is it implied that this is a requirement?
I think that's a very good question, Brian. And the fact is, yes, it says in the regulation literally that you have to have these investigations. Does not mean you have to have a policy. Having a policy allows you to be able to put those parameters around when you're doing the investigation, because if you don't, then they could come in and expect that you have an investigation for every single thing that happens that's a deviation. And that's where we want to suggest that you write that policy to put some type of boundary around what you're doing. And you should do it based off of the risk associated that you're seeing within your facility. Make it make sense for you.
Right. Now, you talked a lot about how obviously collaboration, right? Getting everybody sort of involved and knowing who is responsible for signing off. Are there any recommendations you have for how that might look in a facility?
It's so difficult to give an answer to that because everyone has got different sizes of facilities and company resources. And it's so easy to say, yeah, create a CAPA team and, that's just their job. And I've seen that in facilities and it works very well, where they're using, software to manage the program and they have people who literally all day long, all they do is CAPAs. But that's not really something that every company can do based off of their size. And that's when I talked through having that management support, especially for the smaller companies. And you really should be writing that into your policy to be able to understand how you justify that risk and how you manage that risk.
Right. You had mentioned before closing that if the root cause is unknown, that you should define your risk level to the FDA. Can you give an example of how you might define your risk level, or is it just inherent in the documentation that you provide?
I think for me, what I would do is whatever the incident was, I would do that health hazard assessment, and then I would say, the root cause is still unknown. We are still gathering data. However, here are the controls we have in place. And whether it's extra testing or more sampling or longer hold times, it's hard to give an example without having one off the top of my head. But just delay or having a more robust system than what your current system is in place of checks and balances, because
Hmm.
you realize that you have this issue going on and you want to make sure that you are documenting the stricter controls that you put in place because you haven't been able to figure out the root cause yet.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm just looking at this comment from Hugh. He says, "I have an auditor coming today. Send slides." Yes, we will send those slides, Hugh. Don't worry, we've got your back. That's good. All right, a
Good luck
few
with your
questions here.
audit.
Yeah, good luck, Hugh. A few questions here around what might, I guess, what types of details should be included in some of these investigations. So I'm going to start with one here that should the environmental monitoring report be shared with the FDA?
Okay, so that's a tricky one, right? Because when you're in these investigations, you don't necessarily want to show your entire card. However, they have the right to ask for that anyway. So if it is something that is part of your investigation, then yes, you should show it. Obviously, you have to be careful because if you're focusing on one line, you don't want to give them your entire program, but they have the right to ask for the rest of it during the audit. That one's
Hmm.
a tricky one, and not without getting into, corporate policies and things, it can be very difficult to provide that evidence without showing the full report.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right. The question around how do you handle supplier monitoring in your plan or prove that your suppliers are not at risk? Because if you take the 5 why methodologies, right, like so it could kind of take you all the way back to where maybe raw materials are coming from or raw ingredients are coming from, and how far back, I guess, do you need to take your investigation?
That's a really good question. And for me, when you're tracking through your root causes, as long as you are able to justify that it did not come from your plant, then that is a good leap. That makes sense to go to your supplier, right? But you need to be able to make sure and to prove that you took all the steps necessary to ensure that it was not coming from inside your plant. And so then once you do
Right,
that, you can say to your supplier, and you can actually ask your supplier to conduct a root cause investigation for you. You
right.
could do it with them. You could go do a site visit. There's several different options there. It's always easy to say, well, no, it definitely didn't come from us, but make sure that you have the documented evidence that proves you have checked every nook and cranny within your own site before you start doing those supplier risk assessments or investigations.
Exactly. All right. Well, on the same thread here, you had mentioned under the slide where it said initial steps to have good traceability records. So, what would you classify as good? And that's a loaded question.
So whenever you do a traceability exercise having to do with an event, you're going to conduct it as if you were conducting a true traceability exercise for any other audit, or for any other annual requirement. You have to be able to prove that the bracket of time at which this incident occurred, wherever you decided to begin the hold and end the hold, for example, is where you believe it is. So if your system says it's all in-house, show me the pallet numbers, show me the locations, include that. Show me where they're all on hold, include that. Same thing goes for if they are out in commerce. And it's going to get a lot trickier there because you have to be able to prove they went where your end game went, right? Your system should show you that. And when you do that exercise, you can also include the notification that you sent to your customers that said, hey, this incident has occurred. And we're talking recall type, withdrawal type scenarios there, which you should be doing all that documentation anyway for your traceability under the recall clause of
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
21 CFR regulations.
Right. Going back to a comment you said that 483s could be issues for improper CAPA plans, and then you made a comment that yes, some folks might be sort of in their infancy and building this out versus those that are more mature. Um, any stories that you could tell around that, like how you can, I guess, accelerate the maturity of your CAPA plan? What advice, I guess, would you give?
It's not easy to accelerate it, but it is easy to implement it to a point of where it is successful. And then at that point in time, you begin to branch it out. So I spoke in the beginning about making sure that when you begin these type of programs that you focus on a certain amount of things. So I will give an example, a client that I worked with in the past where we basically revamped their CAPA program and we started over from the beginning and we identified 4 things that was going to initiate a CAPA, just 4 things. And this was based off of, an incident investigation 483 with the FDA. And we focused on the things that we knew the FDA had issues with in their 483. So once we got that program up and running, it took a good 3 to 6 months to train everyone, to start the new system, to put people in place to understand how to do it. And then we started completing the CAPAs, right? And I would review them personally. I was working with them very closely. And pretty much at the end of that year, you kind of do an assessment, like a health check to see, okay, how well are we doing with these? Do we feel like we have a handle on it? Are we able to successfully complete these investigations for these 4 different criteria? And do we feel like we're ready to take the next step, which is to branch out, right? Because it's so easy to say, yes, we want to do a CAPA on everything, but you need to focus it to in order your firm to have a successful program first and get used to doing it and understand how to do it and train everyone how to do it and make sure that it is working before you move on. So then at that point you say, okay, we're going to bring in 4 more criteria. So now we have 8 different things that are going to cause a CAPA. And also, I think it's important to understand the level of CAPA, and you can identify different levels within that hierarchy, whether or not you're just doing a simple deviation investigation or a full-blown CAPA, and you can also detail that in your policy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Looks like we just have a time for maybe 2 more questions here. Going back to the question about the suppliers, we have one on the opposite end. Does this impact retailers at all, like grocery retailers?
So that's a hard question because there is not necessarily something in the retail food code about it. However, I would say that when these incidents occur, especially if a retailer is on the receiving end of that, they need to at least be aware of who to point the investigators to, right? Well, so if we had an issue and there was a withdrawal, this is the company contact and this is their investigation. Now, it's really good to have that communication between retailers and suppliers because they want to be able to tell you what to do with the product and also when to tell you that the investigation has been closed out and the issue has been solved.
Hmm.
I hope I answered that okay. I'm not sure if that was what they were going for there.
We'll see if they pipe back in. I
Okay.
understand you, but that sounded good to me. All right, Diana's asking, is there a sample form for the deviation levels?
Yeah, actually, I believe we have got one. I know there's one that I used last year that we created, and we're able to help you out with that if you need be. Please contact me.
All right. Okay, one question here to close things out, I think. Have you seen the tool cause mapping being used by any facility? This is from Tomeo, and he asks, it is an Excel based on the 5Y techniques that meets with the fishbone and has multiple other worksheets to document your root cause investigation.
No, but that sounds really interesting. I bet that's a very good tool to use.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's multiple tools out there, as we know, but obviously it's the process that'll get you there. And as
Exactly.
you mentioned, Lacey, it's all about the documentation, showing proof that you're actually on top of it and you have a good plan in place. So,
Absolutely.
All right, I think it's a good time to close it out. We do have some other questions that are coming in, but we'll follow up with you folks later on. Please do check out safetychain.com for some more FSMA related resources. And of course, please engage with TAG. They are the experts here, just like Lacey. If you have any questions, we'll be sure to leave you with their contact information as we follow up with the slides and the recording. Lacey, you are a rock star, and I absolutely enjoyed our session today. We definitely hope you come back soon.
Oh, I will. Thank you, Joe. Talk to y'all later.
Okay, take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend ahead.
Bye.
Bye.